incident manager with the Cisco Product Security Incident Response Team, where he mentors and leads engineers and incident managers during the investigation, resolution, and security vulnerabilities in all Cisco products. I think he's going to have a lot of interesting stories, and I'd like to turn the podium over to Omar. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. And first of all, outstanding job. This is my first time that I was at your second conference. It's unbelievable the amount of folks and interaction here. So thanks for inviting me. If I was gonna, I guess, summarize what I do for a living, I investigate all the bad news for Cisco, and there are a lot, right? And also I investigate all the bad news for peer companies as well. I'm a part of the board of a non-profit organization called Rocketcity, where Microsoft, Oracle, Cisco, Google, Amazon, well, Google is about to do, Nokia, IBM, and I think I already mentioned Juniper. We're all putting our estimate on how to actually battle this front from a vendor perspective. So whenever we actually receive a vulnerability from whoever. Right? So what I wanted to do today is actually go over how we are seeing network security as being evolving right now. I'm preaching to the choir. Every time that I go to a security conference, what I actually invite everybody is to take the word outside of this room, because pretty much everybody here, one, I'm preaching to the choir. Two, if you're here, you care about security. The people that don't care about security, they're not here. And so basically, I see yourself as security advocates. So a lot of the things in here is no news to you. So of course, attacks are getting a lot more targeted. They're getting a lot more sophisticated, and they're getting a lot more organized. There's a lot of organized campaigns actually going on right now, but things that we're actually seeing right now is actually that custom malware is being deployed not only in the host, but also in network infrastructure devices. The other thing is that in a lot of cases that whenever we actually help customers and help the industry, we're actually seeing that even in smaller organizations, if you're a large organization, most definitely you're going to get a couple of bad actors, either already penetrating your network, exfiltrating data from your network, but even in smaller environments, you actually see campaigns that is more than one attacker or more than one organization. However, we want to actually see it. Attacking infrastructure, again, is actually a platform for the next attack. So if I am able to take ownership of a third of your network infrastructure here, of course all bets are off, right? Everything touches the network. The other one is that a lot of people actually are blind as far as these attacks. I'm going to go over some statistics a little bit later in the presentation, but you're actually going to see these that a lot of people continue to be blind. Some of them, of course, are considered loss of control, and we're actually seeing, of course, the resurrection of denial service, but it's actually being used as a precursor to additional damage. So if you look at, I guess, the evolution, threat evolution, early in the 2000s, of course, we have worms. You guys are all aware of this, In the 2005, 2000, over 2000s, we actually saw, the evolution of rootkits, spyware, then we have, APT, the APT word. A lot of people actually, have a joke to, my APT is bigger than your APT, so help define that. Now, what we're seeing today is that the actual attack surface is actually increasing dramatically. And later I have a video that I will actually go over. It's actually not even a security video, but you will see how the attack surface, the nerve candy for attackers, is actually getting a lot bigger. So again, ultimately the modern threat is that before we actually focus a lot into, building firewalls, us here in our Cisco, we sell, all those products. But we built a whole bunch of forts around the organization, but right now it doesn't matter because your users are actually getting attacked or getting owned or compromised everywhere, right? So right now in this conference, with my Wi-Fi off and my phone off, just in case you guys, I know that some of you were in training, so I don't want to be guinea pig. But one of the things is actually that infection is occurring outside of the perimeter. And then, of course, those threats are actually going in the organization, and then, of course, extraditing information, which is, probably 90% of, the real threat is actually how to not only make, well, you will see, but one of the major, I guess, movements right now is how to expedite information without, being caught, rather than actually putting a YouTube video like you saw before. It's actually getting a lot complicated. 60% of the attacks actually we're seeing, and this is actually from data as recent as June, that we're actually seeing attacks getting extraditing information within hours, and in some cases within minutes. Now, over 62% of those attacks, were left undetected, not only for months, but in some cases for years, right? So we're actually falling behind into the way that we're actually, detecting these attacks. This came from Verizon's security breach report, and it goes hand in hand, exactly verbatim what we're seeing at Cisco. 60% stolen in minutes. And if you see in there that actually they decompose, I guess, the metrics a little bit into the types of attack and the type of discovery. And I'll have this for your reference later on. Now, right now, everybody, I guess, is somewhat giving up. And there's a lot of fatalism sense out there. It's not so much of, if you're going to get compromised, it's like you're already compromised. So how can you contain the damage that's actually happening in your organization, right? We have a group of security research folks that work hand in hand with those industry peers, and we actually did a study with very large organizations and a couple of medium-sized organizations as well. And whenever we were looking at their network and doing some forensic activities, we actually saw that 100% of the stuff of the networks that we actually looked, they were compromised and they were talking to places that they were not supposed to. Not 90, not 99.9, 100% of them. So that statement that you saw before of that fatalism that you're actually probably going to compromise, you're most likely are compromised. If you look, you're going to find stuff. That's the thing that, in the past it's like, I may be the target, you're already a target, and you're going to see that. The other thing is that we're seeing the evolution of the exploit kits fairly dramatic and changing a lot, specifically attacking things that are common infrastructure for even services that are not really related to corporate applications. So for example, if you see Fiesta in there, which is a new exploit kit that we're actually observing since the beginning of the year, who actually can tell me what Fiesta attacks? Somebody. Silverlight. And what uses, or what thing that is very popular on the internet uses Silverlight? Netflix. Right? So depending on who you ask, if 20%, 15%, 18% of the traffic on the internet is Netflix at night, my attack surface is pretty big in there, right? Now the other one, you guys are familiar with the black hole exploit kit? Anybody? Right? So that evolved into Cool, and if you see in there, that's actually the most prevalent exploit kit that we're actually seeing right now. Now, there's the new, the shiny, and the old school, or shall I say stupidity, that actually happens. This was actually published literally 3 days ago, 3 or 4 days ago, by the Register. Is that if you're a hacker, just find another career, because you don't even need you, right? So this was actually done by Trustwave, and basically what they did is based on their penetration testing. I don't know how legal that is, but based on the customer, I guess the password databases, they actually started cracking those passwords, and they actually saw that about a third of all the passwords that were compromised, a third were password one. Right? So again, your APT is bigger than my APT, but you still have this type of stupidity actually going on. The other thing is that Java continues to be, and I'm not pointing fingers to specific application or everything, but I consider this as a critical infrastructure of the internet. If we're still using Java very widely, right? and it comprised over 75% of all the web kits or web exploits observed in a study that we actually did, specifically with the Cisco Web Security solution that we have. 76% of the companies that we actually observed were running Java 6, which is end of life, unsupported, and all the vulnerabilities and everything. 76%. So again, who are targets? No pun intended. Every single corporation is a target. Doesn't matter if it's small, big. Every single country is a target. You are a target. As a matter of fact, if you are here right now, most definitely you're going to be a target. I heard that this is actually something that I went to the tour at NASA yesterday. One of the guys was actually mentioning that in this area there's one of the biggest concentration of PhDs in the whole United States and probably the whole world. Well, just because you're here, you're probably a target, and if you have double PhDs, you're also a target because you have a lot of intellectual property. Not only that, if you're a system admin, if you're a security expert, and everything, you're a target because you're probably trying to avoid what I'm actually going to do to you. Right? So if I can compromise you and I know my enemy better than you know me, you're definitely a target. So never underestimate your opponent. Even ninjas get hacked, and I can actually, this is kind of a joke, but my friend H.D. Moore, literally he's actually my friend, so I'm not I can make fun of him. This actually happened last year in October 11th to be exact. And how many of you are familiar with Rapid 7? Right? They're a very, 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 very good set of engineers, right? So even if you actually have all this kung fu, around you, their website actually, or Metasploit.com was actually hijacked and spoofed, and there was defaced. And the reason that, or the way that they did that is by a fax. They actually sent supposedly approved change management control over fax, and they were actually able to not only, get it approved, but also, to deface the actual website. Target attacks. We're seeing that attackers or scammers, depending on how who the bad actor is, they know trends in the industry, they know trends in the market, they know trends of even how people, look for jobs. So between February and April, everybody's actually filing taxes and everything, so of course their campaigns are actually against, tax season. They even know that between January and March, because of statistics, and September and December, people look for more jobs, and they're also launching campaigns. Now, if I post a job right now for, I don't know, a very good salary, you probably make a lot more than me, but, let's say 150,000, 200,000, something extremely good. And especially whenever, there's sentiment, whether, specific companies, downsizing, or whether, the economy is actually not doing so well. If you actually see one of these jobs, you're probably going to apply, right? Seems legitimate, especially if they interview you. Now, in a job, whenever they interview you, you want to shine, right? So a lot of people say, what they did in the past. So if I know that Omar works at Cisco, investigated all the bad news at Cisco, and I interview him, and I ask him, how he investigated, what are those bad news? A lot of people actually give away a lot of information, right? And then, I interview you, I probably get somebody else on the phone to do a second round of interviews, so it seems legit, but I'm doing the best social engineering there is out there, right? So they know that, they go over national, file national disasters, and this is actually recent. Even poor Robin Williams, rest in peace, they're actually launching campaigns of his head, with, I guess, dead pictures of him or fake pictures of him, running around the internet to actually do a clickbait as well. Now, who are these hackers or bad actors? Of course, you all know, or don't know who they are. Of course, from the activism to, the things that are a little bit more political in nation and nation state, of course, you have a lot of debates. But you saw some of the statistics that Dr. Vaughn gave in the morning. I'll have some statistics later in the presentation, but it's all over the place. Now, the other thing is that even insiders, right? So of course you can take the Snowden use case and you can bound that and milk that forever. But insiders are actually one of the biggest threats right now, and even what we call the unattended or unintended insider. Just the example that I gave you regarding trying to hire somebody, and it would probably leak some information on what are, how Cisco actually is deploying the firewalls, how Cisco is actually monitoring their network, how, he took a big problem that probably is very persistent and trying to solve it. It is not solved. So a lot of those actually are, even without the folks actually knowing. Now, if you look at this, according to Forrester Research in 2013 in October, they actually did a study, and insiders were the top sources of actually breaches in the last 12 months. Again, in their study, but whenever they did that, only 42% of the North American and European companies that they actually surveyed received some training on how to remain secure. Again, the importance of not preaching to the choir, but actually trying to advocate this outside of this conference. Now, this is all over, repeated. Probably, you can probably pick a new article this week, and it's still going to probably show you the same. Large enterprises are actually not doing enough to detect and address the entire threat. It's not a hacker problem, it's not a technical problem. In a lot of cases, it's actually a human problem in most cases. So how can you contain, stupidity? So there was an awesome shirt, years ago in Takedowncon that you have, social engineering, there was no patch to human stupidity. In a lot of cases, it's actually not stupidity. They're actually, folks that are trying to do the right thing as well, right? So, at any rate, so who am I? This is again my name. My email address is there. Everything of me. General trends in networking. I want to go over not only in security, but how the industry is actually changing the way that we actually do networking right now, and how that is actually increasing the attack surface right now. We can go over tons and tons of data. As a matter of fact, Cisco actually has a group. It's called BNI, and basically what they do is they predict. They have a big 8-ball, and they predict, how the internet is actually going to grow in the future. Well, it is growing, and even the predictions that we actually have seen in the past are even exceeding the expectations that we had. But what I want to do, if I may, I wanted to show a little video. And then after that, I'm going to deep dive into why this is relevant or important. Just a second. Marco pen.
Research firm IDC predicts that the Internet of Everything, or IoE, will generate nearly $9 trillion in annual sales by 2020. By comparison, the total revenue of the consumer electronics industry in 2013 was about $1.1 trillion. The total annual sales of the San Francisco Bay Area's 150 largest technology companies in 2012 were $677 billion. A study conducted by General Electric compared the IoE trend to the Industrial Revolution of the 18th and 19th centuries, when innovation in manufacturing transformed the way we do business and interact with machines. General Electric concluded that IoE, over the next 20 years, could add as much as $15 trillion to the global gross domestic product, roughly the size of today's US economy. Additionally, Cisco estimates a value of $19 trillion in profits and cost savings over the next decade for companies that can harness IoE. $14.4 trillion from new private sector profits, and $4.6 trillion from public sector cost savings and new revenues. Several market disruptions are driving IoE relevance. mobile-based end devices, cloud-based applications, and social media. The new IoE economy will profoundly affect 4 major facets of daily life. The first is people. As the internet evolves toward IoE, people will be connected in more relevant, valuable ways. For example, in the future, sensors placed on the skin or sewn into clothing will provide information about a person's vital signs. In this way, according to Gardner, people themselves will become nodes on the internet, second or things. Physical items such as sensors, consumer devices, and enterprise assets connected to the internet and to each other will sense more data and become context-aware. IT represents a fraction of the cyber-physical world. Only 0.6% of things are connected to the internet today. There were 1,000 internet devices in 1984, 1 million in 1992, and 10 billion in 2008. 50 billion devices are expected to be connected by 2020. Third is data. Rather than simply reporting raw data, connected things will send higher-level information back to machines, computers, and people for further evaluation and decision-making. Meanwhile, the volume of data is growing exponentially. An estimated 4,000 exabytes of data were stored in the cloud at the end of 2012, and the contributions from Amazon and Facebook amounted to 20 petabytes of data per day. That is more data than what was created by all humans in the previous 5,000 years. To reach an audience of 50 million people, it took television 13 years. The internet, 4 years. Apple's iPod, 3 years. And Facebook, 2 years. The Internet of Everything will require a new intelligent network and enormous data storage capacity. According to web visionary Mark Andreessen, the US will need massive investment in existing and new networks for decades to come. Status quo, not sufficient. What's more, in the new IoE economy, devices and sensors will augment human senses and become the eyes and ears for companies, law-abiding citizens, and even for hackers. Security and privacy will be top concerns. The Internet of Everything is inevitable. It is happening. It is here. Are we ready?
Yeah. So that video is not like I'm just drinking the Cisco Kool-Aid, but it is inevitable. I mean, that's actually what's going to happen. This is what we're pitching into the industry, and actually what the industry is actually saying is, if you saw in there, the studies were not even by Cisco, they were by ADC, General Electric, and some other folks, right? So, I mean, it is what it is. You know, you carry 10,000, different devices. You're actually gonna get, devices embedded into humans. Everything is a target. You actually saw that we cannot even patch. Devices are in the critical infrastructure everywhere. Imagine, these things. Not only that, but if you are trying to protect the network and you're trying to get data to look for indicators of compromise, if you think that data is humongous right now, imagine what it's actually going to be. It's going to be exponential, right? So you have these IT megatrends that actually are complicated the issue on the any-to-any connection or the any-to-any problem, where everything is actually connected to whatever, and the data is stored wherever, right? Now, if you look at this very good comparison from 2005 and 2014, growing from 128 megabytes to 128 gigabytes, that's actually going to get even, worse or better. I guess better for us than nerds. But storage is also cheap, and just like network infrastructure devices, storage is where the real meat is for attackers, because that's where your crown jewels is. So what we're seeing is that the attacks actually, or the exploits, or at least the focus for the bad actors, shifting from the host to the infrastructure, from the infrastructure to even storage. And in a lot of cases, storage is actually something that is buried in your data center, that is actually protected by infrastructure and everything, but attackers actually are getting a lot more sophisticated, and there's custom malware into very large storage arrays, and of course there are management platforms as well. And we're actually seeing that I'm not gonna go, preaching to the choir here. You know what the young folks are. How many of you think that privacy is gone? That it doesn't exist anymore? Okay. So I see a few of you. Well, we did a study, I don't know, 3 years ago, and we took, millennials, and basically 100% of them said, there's no privacy. And now with all the fiasco, of surveillance and everything, so of course the big sentiment is not only privacy, but it's trust, right? So it's shifting from, there's no privacy, but do I even trust you, right? So that's actually something that we're facing, in the industry as we speak. The other one is, the mega trends that we saw, and I have a joke in some, conferences that I have presented is that if I say cloud or BYOD, everything you have to drink, right? Because it's like big milk and over and over and over and over. But it doesn't matter if you have the biggest defense in your network, the best, wireless infrastructure, and it's pretty hard for me to say because I work for Cisco. But if I actually can take my phone to your, lab, and if you have a new prototype of a new product that you actually have, and I take a couple of pictures and I send it through, my 4G LTE connection that is faster than your network, and probably even more secure, it doesn't matter what you're protecting there, right? So one is technology, the other one is trust and behaviors and human patterns as well. Then what you actually have seen in the last few years is that basically if you have one guy with a good idea and another guy that has a credit card can go in the cloud and then create a new cloud service. Right? You go to Amazon, you have a new startup, and you get bought by Facebook by billions and billions of dollars. So right now, if I have an idea, and another one has a good, better idea to steal a credit card, and then also launch attacks, either DDoS, malware, hosting malware, or spam, you can also do that in the cloud. So that's the things that we're actually going to shift is that not only for you to make money in the legal way, it's extremely easy for somebody to do this, but for the bad actors as well, right? Especially if I do this over and over and over with stolen credit cards. One of the things that we saw, and you probably are familiar with this, for the last 18 months or so, we're seeing the waves coming for DDoS against U.S. financial institutions. One of the things that we saw was that a lot of these attacks were actually launched from infrastructure, legitimately done, but either they were compromised or they were actually rented using a stolen credit card. So the attackers were smart enough that they actually launched a parallel attack to the IVRs for the numbers in the back of the credit card. So if your credit card was stolen, you cannot even call the IVR number and report it stolen. Right? So I mean, again, it's getting a little bit out of control there. Now, there's also a little hint in here is that I'm facing a really monumental task on trying to protect my infrastructure, but a lot of people go into what we call the I do not care mode. The I do not care mode is not so much of I do not care about my organization. I don't care if my industry peer, my partner, and everything is getting attacked. I have enough problems of my own. The problem with that is that a lot of this tech, because I don't care, my partner, a lot of these injections or the initial access or attack vectors may actually come from a partner, may actually come from a trusted, industry peer, and you do have to care, right? So again, not only the scalability into how am I going to face or I'm going to attack this type of problem internally, but how do I know that my partner has a good third-party software a policy, has good way of actually providing encryption of the stuff, the data retention of probably intellectual property that I'm sharing with them. You cannot fix your partner, but you can identify what are the risks, so you can actually minimize it whenever you're doing business decisions. Now, again, it's kind of repetitive. Now, we have a shift or a paradigm in the way that security folks are actually looking at security. Initially, like I mentioned, a lot of people have concentrated building forts out there, getting the best firewalls, getting the best intrusion prevention system and everything. So they have concentrated on actually trying to protect from the outside in, right? So and they have probably done a pretty good job, but they never actually look into things extraditing from the corporation. So we did a study, as a matter of fact, we have some partners that were doing threat analytics and some services for customers. But remember that 100% of the organizations that we saw before, they were compromised. A lot of them were based in the U.S., only in the U.S. And at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, they were actually talking a lot to websites that had no content. Not only that, but they were also in embargo countries that you were not even supposed to even do business with from the beginning, right? So the question that I have is, why are you still taking to a lot of known bad drones? Why you're not paying attention to the trends of how the information is actually not only being expedited but also controlled? If you look at botnets in the past, most of the time it was actually IRC. Now it's actually integrating with encryption, and even Twitter has actually been used to do command and control communications to botnets, right? So Twitter has HTTPS, might as well use it. It's an infrastructure, and it's very, very, very reliable, right? So those are the things that actually you're seeing as far as the shift on things that we actually have to look for, not only trying to protect from the outside in, but also look for the inside out. Again, what I mentioned in the beginning is that what I do for Cisco is I investigate all the bad news for Cisco. There's a lot of trends of vulnerability disclosures that we're seeing. I'm going to be trying to be, there's a lot of material here that I'm going to try to be brief, but I started at Cisco in '99, but I've been working with the PISA team one way or the other, probably shortly after that, since 2000. We're seeing actually a shift into the way that vulnerabilities are reported to us. So initially, you get a typical guy that will present at a conference, and they have a shiny vulnerability they found, and they try to milk it, probably create a company, update their resume, and probably get hacked. Right? So that's the typical researcher that you saw there from the 2000s to 2005. They'll send something like, I have a buffer overflow that I can take down half the internet, and can you please put, my name in your advisory so I can update my resume? So sure, we do that. Then after that, it's like, shoot, I can make money out of this, right? So now I found a buffer overflow on your IP phone, and I can probably listen to your conversation. So they have, a whole bunch of history and everything, but in this case, it's like, pay me, or let me play with a $12 million, device that you have because I don't have access to it. In a lot of cases, the problem that we're facing, especially in vendors, is that you cannot scale for, there's a lot of bug bounties. As a matter of fact, we acquired a company called Meraki that they do bug bounties. But you can really not scale into the fact am I going to pay you this much for buffer overflow that will take half of Europe's internet? Or am I going to pay you, for, some process scripted on some management application that perhaps is end of life for 10 years, right? So we have hundreds of different products. So we as vendors, we're actually facing a very, very, dramatic shift as well. So in most cases, we actually, and I have flown in researchers to, to my office from all over the world. We give them access to gear, we give them, the references and everything. At the end of the day, if it comes to protect our customers, we'll do whatever is necessary, right? But you're facing the scalability. So they found that out, and it's okay, I'm not going to go to you, I'm going to go to brokers. So I'm not going to go to Microsoft, I'm not going to go to the thing. So there's actually companies, of course, that are brokers, right? So, and it's kudos to them because actually a lot of them are actually doing an outstanding job on working with the vendors and even, working on the timelines. But then you saw, that they actually pay the researchers and they do whatever. They either create IPS signatures or, whatever their motive is, they also make money. So that's an economy of consent. Now is that I don't want to present at a conference. If I can make $100,000 selling an exploit right now, why do I need a resume if I can do that 3 times a month, right? if I can actually build in my exploit kits return on investment and see if my exploit is actually better, I can create my own stock market for exploits. Whether you want to get paid in Bitcoin or whatever, I can make a lot more money. I don't need the resume, I don't need the brokers, I don't need the vendor. I'm going to build this thing. If I get caught, then I'll report it somehow, or get somebody else to report it. That is what is actually keeping me up at night right now. Right? Is that the folks that are actually trying to do the right things are those researchers that work with vendors or work with anybody else. They go present the conference and give them credit. What is actually happening right now is the real bad guys are not going to conferences. I'm saying that the bad guys are not telling the vendors, they're not telling everybody. They're actually making money, making exploit, and there's a lot of money to be made out there, right? And of course that's one of the big shifts. And then of course they sell that to whoever, right? If you want to do corporate espionage, there's a lot of places you can buy exploits, against your competitor. If you actually want to do whatever your motive is, you can actually do this, fairly easily. And especially if you have a lot of money, you can get the best ones out there. Now, the other shift that we're seeing, and this is probably one of the few things that if I start again, I have to drink hardly, right? So one of the shifts that we're actually seeing is that in the past, remember that non-profit organization that we call ICASI, we work with CERT, we work with medical coordination agencies, and now we're seeing the shift that this disclosure is, is getting or catching everybody by surprise at the same time. So I know that you guys are familiar with this, so I'm going to skip. You can probably go into a lot of the resources that I have here, and I'll make slides available later. But one of the things that I want to highlight here, today is OpenSSL. 2/3 of the web servers out there run OpenSSL, so it's what I consider critical infrastructure. More than 2/3 of my products at Cisco run, somewhat of a SSL variation, and a lot of them use OpenSSL. As a matter of fact, we centralize OpenSSL at Cisco called Cisco SSL, so we can patch, faster, and then push it out to all the products. So this is actually something that I consider critical infrastructure on the internet, even though if you think about it just like an open source package. The other one that is going to become the next OpenSSL, it's not like I'm predicting something, is OpenStack. Right? Clouds are going to be formed based on a lot of open source components. There's a lot of dilemma, whether you have more eyes or less eyes into it, but we do as an industry have to put our heads together on how we can better protect this infrastructure. So Cisco, Apple, Facebook, Google, and many others, we're actually trying to fund some of these projects and host them in line and probably even collaborate with them into the fact that if we do use them, we have to make them more secure. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of the attack telemetry because I know that I'm running a little bit behind, but I'll make these available for your reference later. The other thing that I mentioned is that there's a new threat landscape. One of them is actually being a lot more targeted attacks against network infrastructure, and a lot of people actually didn't have a lot of knowledge as far as how to attack the network, or the infrastructure themselves, or the money to actually put a $12 million device to do the research. Now the money and the tax are there, right? It was theoretical between 2005 and 2006, whenever you saw effects and Lane and all researchers actually publishing this. It is actually happening right now as we speak. There's custom malware being done against infrastructure devices. We're seeing a lot of different attack methods, and some of them, or most of them, are not because of a specific vulnerability on a device. If not, they can attack your management application, and then from your management application, all your bets are off. You're able to change configurations, you're able to hide commands, you do a lot of things. Now, I do have a lot of different resources here into how you can do identification techniques of indicators of compromise, at least in Cisco devices, where you can do the same thing in other devices as well, specifically in Cisco iOS, and how to do things like numeric verification techniques to look for things that are out of normal, or even going to the mobile level stuff as analyzing coordinates to look for suspicious commands that people should not even be running or doesn't even exist in infrastructure devices like iOS. Again, I'll post this along with the white paper that actually we just published on this. The last thing that I want to actually cover is that all these trends are fueling this huge economy. It's getting more complicated and it's getting a lot more costly. So not only for you to manage and monitor your network, but look for indicators of compromise. A lot of people cannot scale, right? I mean, the industry cannot scale, and you will not be able to scale 100%. So, if you look at the cost of a SOC, Security Operations Center, for a medium enterprise, just by going over some of the high-level things, probably you have 2 data centers that require monitoring. You have about 15,000 employees, 40 or 50 incidents per week or so. That's actually fairly typical for a medium enterprise. And you probably staff, let's say 11 people, right? So if you see there year by year, there's a recursive, a continuous cost for an organization. As you go larger, of course, that cost actually increases dramatically, including us, at Cisco. We're probably not even the top tier enterprise. We're probably large enterprise, the top tier that have, think about $2.2 million employees like Omar, right? Not to mention anybody, but, large organizations like that. So it is huge. And again, if you actually look into the tools and the talent that you have to attract to be able to support these activities, from intrusion detection, from products to people, anomaly detections, malware analysis, packet capture capabilities, how can you do packet capture of petabytes of data that is actually coming to your infrastructure. Right? Alex Stamos, as a matter of fact, I was talking to him, but he actually had a good observation a few weeks ago in Vegas, is that in Yahoo, even if he buys firewalls and everything, they cannot even scale enough into the amount of data they actually are getting, right? So even if he's putting a continuous order every single week to protect the infrastructure, you're not going to be able to scale with every single thing that's out there. So how can you even do packet capture to do indicators of compromise and do low-level things, right? Again, look for protocol metadata, look higher up like NetFlow and some other things that you can get, plus pay somebody to get the threat intelligence feeds. It gets a lot more complicated. So what I want to actually do is, and this is actually something that Cisco is leading, but it's an industry thing, and we're actually going to open source it. It's going to be open SOC, and it's not out yet, so it's kind of like, this is probably the second audience that we actually have presented to. But basically, it is an open source framework because we're facing that same thing, not only to protect Cisco, but for services that actually Cisco has, for managed threat defense. So what we did is actually we looked into things that are there that will actually help you, or potentially help you, depending on who you are, to scale this paradigm on where things like log analytics products that right now cannot scale. And again, it's not to diminish the products and everything, but we're actually facing into the way that you actually have to analyze 20 terabytes or 30 terabytes of data each day just for one customer, not across the board. It is humongous, right? So what we're doing is actually we're using already assisted big data tools like Hadoop and Storm and Elasticsearch and other things. So we're actually calling this framework OpenSOC into, if you're actually looking into doing things like multi-petabyte storage and interactive queries, real-time search, and scale the way that actually you do monitoring, whether it's for your security operations centers or even for research. We're doing that and open source it to the public, and basically it will be generally available. Hopefully we'll stay on track. in September, so next month. So again, it's an open source project. Look for it in GitHub. It's actually going to be completely in GitHub. We're starting at Cisco, but it's actually going to be something that Hortonworks is also working with us and several other partners as well. And the key functionalities is actually to do raw packet analysis, telemetry ingest, real-time, of course, telemetry and search, specifically in using Elasticsearch and also machine learning modules that can be integrated into that. So if you look at it, and I'm going to skip this real quick, it's going to be Apache license. So it's going to be under the Apache license. For us, what we do, we have a service called Managed Threat Defense, where we actually send a rack, and it's a pretty big rack, to a customer site, where if you want to protect a specific area of your network, we can deploy this pretty easily, and then try to actually collect telemetry information from your network. Now, if you look at it from a high level, you can have many telemetry sources from syslog to netflow to packet captures to whatever you want to dump in. Basically, all that data collection is either done in hardware or it's actually thrown into an open source project called or component called Flume. Then Flume actually distills that and then sends it to a messaging system called Kafka. So for those of you who are not familiar with big data, some of these platforms, I'll have a whole bunch of reference in the presentation later on, but then Kafka, will feed all that into real-time processing capabilities of Storm. Storm is where you can actually put, some machine learning, analysis, and then from there you can even store it, right, through Hive, or, you can do search through Elasticsearch, and of course you can do, in case of pickup tables with using things like HBase. And then from there, I'm not going to go into all the different details, but you can also put in threat intelligence feeds to whoever you actually pay to get the intelligence from, and then analyze it against it, right? So do things like geolocation, do a lot of very custom things in there. Then of course we have a presentation later that we're going to be open sourcing as well or contributing to, where you can feed into whatever analytics tools that you actually want as well. Anyways, I would really like to thank you for your time today. So again, two things, threat evolution, what we as an industry are trying to actually do to keep ahead, and then of course the announcement of that open source tool. So if you guys are interested, play with it. Thank you, and thanks for all.